Are you familiar with the term occupational hazard? It's like something that's hazardous or dangerous associated with particular professions. Each profession has different dangers or hazards that people doing that profession have to watch out for. And I'll just say this, I was very unaware of the occupational hazards of being a pastor before I became a pastor or as I was becoming one. And the one that is still most hazardous is this question. When I meet somebody new or on a plane or I'm coaching a new team or something, what do you do for a living? Because when I say what I do, the responses are strange. Like some of them are like, oh, wait, what do you do the other 6 days of the week? Thank you. When I was quitting my job to become a pastor, my boss said, well, do you need to quit this job to do that? Like, can't you just get your sermons off the internet? Someone might say, wait, do you eat pork? Or that was weird. You're a pastor? Aren't you married already? Yes, I'm married and I am a pastor. And this one was my favorite one, was like, wow, you look way too young to be a priest. I don't get that one as much as I used to. I don't know why. So some of those are just kind of funny and strange. Some of the responses, man, honestly, are sad, right? Like if I say I'm a pastor, all of a sudden people start feeling the need to confess that it's been a long time since they've been to church or the temple or whatever, or they'll say, oh, you're a good person, or like somehow they're a bad person. I don't like making people feel guilty just by telling them what I do for a living. Or oftentimes, and most often, people will then tell me their horror stories about growing up in church or their experience with church leaders or priests or pastors. Which is why I try to avoid the question, or as I said to you a couple of weeks ago, something I stopped saying 10 years ago is I don't tell people I'm a Christian, or I don't say, oh, when they say, what kind of church is it? I don't say it's a Christian church. Because that word Christian, and even by association, the word church, means so many things to so many different people, many of which are negative. And maybe you don't share the same occupational hazards as I do, but you have maybe that hazard when someone finds out you go to church and they say, what'd you do yesterday? And you tell them, and you can see something in them either shuts down, like they don't want to know anymore, like you just told them that you work for Revenue Canada or you went to a dog fighting competition or something. It's just like a no-fly zone. And there's this uncomfortability or maybe guilt or maybe anger that comes up in them, or they tell you their horror stories. And so you can relate to this idea. And that's actually why we started this series a couple weeks ago that we've called Don't Be a Christian. Don't be a Christian. It's actually really good news because Jesus never invited us to be a Christian. He has something so much better in store for us. That in a sense, hopefully that we don't need to feel guilty or afraid of saying something about our faith because we don't have to use the word Christian to describe what we do because Jesus didn't either. And we're taking these weeks to explore, well, what is the so much better thing that Jesus invited us into? And here's why we're doing it. For those of you that are exploring Christian faith, or maybe you stayed away from church and the word because of the negative associations, because of your own firsthand negative experiences, or just you were like, I don't think I want that. But you would understand something new, go, wow, maybe I do. Maybe I need to rethink this. That's way more compelling. That is way better than just being a Christian, some label of static identity that I don't really want to have. For some of you that we'd say, yes, this is my faith. This is what I live for, that you would have a greater understanding of what is it that Jesus invites you into so that you can go hard after that. You can grab hold of that invitation, of the so much better that he offers. And that we would have language to explain to our friends and family and whatever who maybe would want nothing to do with church, but we want to explain to them what is this thing that is so meaningful to us in words and ways that maybe make sense to them, that help them understand where they are in their faith journey and understand what Jesus invites them into as well. A couple weeks ago, we said this, don't be a Christian. This is the starting point. Be close to Jesus. Be close to Jesus. That first and foremost, the starting point for this whole thing is that we are talking about a relationship of love with a God who loves us and invites us to love him in return. Be close to Jesus. Secondly, we talked about, well, don't be a Christian, be known by Jesus. Like even more importantly than you knowing Jesus or knowing things about Jesus or just trying to behave in a certain way is to actually allow Jesus access to the hard to reach, hard to admit, hard to talk about places of our life so that he can begin to change us from the inside out. This is the journey we've been on so far. And listen, I'm not playing with words or just trying to be clever and turning a phrase and trying to give a fresh idea on an old thing. Jesus never did invite anyone to be Christian. And if you read any of the four biographies, the biography, the good news of Jesus according to Matthew, according to Mark, according to Luke, and according to John, what you will find him saying, a word or a phrase that he uses over and over and over again, that is all over the page, dozens and dozens of times, all over the pages of Jesus' biographies, is this: follow me. Follow me was the invitation Jesus gave over and over and over again. Now, part of the problem for us at this particular time in history is social media has taken that word and turned it into something else. And so we kind of need to unpack that. So just for a moment, give you a chance to talk in church. Who do you follow on social and why? And if you're like, I'm not on social, just turn to somebody who is and say, are you? Tell me, who do you follow and why? Take like just 2 minutes to do that with one another. Who do you follow on social and why? All right, you can just wrap those conversations up just for now. You can continue those at the 30-minute party afterwards. You know, I think we need to be honest about what that word means on social now. It kind of means like, oh, I'm interested in what you're doing, or you're good at cooking, or you're good at mountain biking, or you're good at, fixing cars. So I'm going to follow this person just to get some information from them. We need to be honest. Some of the people we follow is just so they will follow us back, because we're not as interested in building their follower list as we are in building our follower list. Some of us is like, hey, you know what? It allows me to keep up with what my friends are doing, be kind of tied into them. Or maybe you follow people because you're hoping to get deals, or it's going to give you a % off at your favorite store, your favorite brand, or something like that. But here's what we need to realize. For Jewish people in the first century, that word follow meant so much more. It was actually, if I could say this, a life-changing invitation. If you were invited to follow, and this is how Jesus' first followers would have heard his words, when he said, follow me, that meant that a rabbi was inviting you to live a new life. In fact, to leave your parents' home and begin to study and live life with this rabbi, to leave the profession, maybe instead of taking over the family farm or the family carpentry business or the family blacksmith business, you were now going to study with a rabbi who would equip you to eventually be a rabbi yourself. And so you would become a disciple of this rabbi, and you would live with them, and you would listen to them, and you would learn from them, and you would watch the way they handle different situations, and you would ask them questions about their teaching and about their interpretation of the Old Testament scriptures, and you would learn their way of life and what to do and what not to do and all of that. And there was a saying actually in first century Judaism, may you be covered in the dust of your rabbi. which is like the saying on those dusty, Palestinian roads in the first century, that you were following so closely behind your rabbi as they walked, they kicked up the dust and you were covered in it. It was this idea that you would, in fact, people, if they hung out with you, would start to tell by how you acted and how you thought and the way you observed certain things. Oh, I can tell you studied with this rabbi or that rabbi, that you would begin to talk like and look like that person that you were following. And this is what it meant to follow Jesus. This is what he was inviting his disciples to do. And yet, I think we can be honest as we read the biographies of Jesus, they found it really hard to do. And here's why. And then literally the way we'd say it, he was hard to follow. In other words, they couldn't pin him down. And here's what I mean. At times, his teaching seemed very progressive, like he was rewriting scripture. Like he would say, you heard it said, referencing to things that God had said in the Old Testament, but I tell you, like almost taking the place of God and giving a new way of living and reinterpreting laws that they had had for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And very progressive and like loosening the boundaries of some of the laws and saying, yeah, it's okay to do this, it's okay to do that. He was getting in trouble with some of the more stricter sects of Judaism, and the disciples say, okay, seems really progressive. And then other times, he seemed like he put the bar impossibly high. Like he would say things like, oh, you've heard it said, don't murder, but I tell you, if you've ever been angry at someone in your heart, it's like you murdered them. Oh, you've heard it said, don't commit adultery. If you've ever lusted after a woman, it's like you've slept with her. And they'd be like, what? Like, who's going to keep that law? Like, this is impossibly high. They couldn't pin him down. Or like, are you progressive? Are you conservative? To use, we use labels like that now. And in fact, that's what we want to know, right? It's many people, how they view religion. People would view religion as saying, hey, many people say, we need to be more conservative. The government needs to be more conservative. Schools need to be more conservative. This is what we need. And others would say, no, we need to be more progressive. We need to throw off the boundaries and the tight restrictions of conservative religion or conservative politics. And we move back and forth between these extremes. And we wave the flag or we burn the flag of this political group or that political group, or this country or that country. We align ourselves with certain tribes on social media, or we are openly critical about them, or we unfollow or dislike or whatever it is. And we are quick to judge people for them being too conservative, or quick to judge them for being too progressive, or quick to align ourselves with one group or the other. It seems that we drift towards these extremes, and it was no different in Jesus' day. There were people who would always ask him, well, Rabbi, what do you mean by that? And Rabbi, are you saying this? And Rabbi, what gives you the authority to do this or to do that? As they were trying to learn from him as a teacher, not just his immediate 12 disciples, but this broader group. And the religious leaders who were looking at him saying, what are you about? What are you teaching? Are you in this camp or that camp? Are you conservative or progressive? And they could not pin him down as he continued to invite them to follow him. And here's the thing. He had something, part of the reason they couldn't pin him down is he had something much more, much greater in mind for them than simply being their rabbi. And he was trying to help them understand that something life-altering to him and to them was coming down the path in his journey as a rabbi, something dramatic that would completely change the course of what it meant to follow him. And he was trying to prepare them for it, but they could not really wrap their heads around it until they watched him be crucified by the Romans. And then 3 days later, they were eating breakfast with him. His death and resurrection changed everything for them. And from then on, they stopped calling him rabbi and they started calling him something else. They started using language that was completely different than just rabbi and good teacher. Do you know what the earliest followers of Jesus went around everywhere saying? This was kind of like the good news that they proclaimed in 3 words. Jesus is Lord. Lord is what they called him, not just teacher, not just rabbi, but you are our Lord. They stopped just learning from him and they started worshiping him after his death and resurrection. And I want you to listen to what one of the earliest followers of Jesus said as he described what happened when Jesus died and was raised to life that changed forever how his followers understood the invitation to follow him. And this is in Galatians 2, verses 19 to 20, and this is who we refer to as the Apostle Paul writing to a church. And he's talking, actually, listen to the language he uses about his own journey with this kind of conservatism versus progressivism or whatever. He says this, verse 19, "For when I tried to keep the law, it condemned me. So I died to the law. I stopped trying to meet all its requirements so that I might live for God. And he goes on with this death and life analogy. He says, my old self has been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. So I live in this earthly body, my own body, I'm still alive, by trusting in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. See, Jesus' plan for his followers was not simply that he would be their rabbi and their teacher. His plan was that he would become their Lord and that he would begin to lead them from the inside out. And the Apostle Paul here in this letter describes the difference between trying to follow laws and actually learning to follow Jesus. He says, you know what? I tried to follow the law. It condemned me, or in everyday terms, it messed me up. And we can actually see when you look at the rest of Paul's writings, we kind of know as he refers to it, how it messed him up. It made him proud because he saw himself as someone who knew everything, who was a religious authority and who lived a very clean and perfect life. And it also made him ashamed and guilty because he felt like he knew there were times and places, even maybe not that other people didn't see, but he knew about himself where he didn't measure up. And so he had both pride and shame in his life because of the law. And so he says, you know what? I died to it. I stopped trying to live it. And he speaks in such dramatic terms, right? He says, now I don't follow the law, I follow Jesus. Which means now he leads me now from the inside out. And so if I can just say this, and maybe this sounds very obvious to you, but to follow Jesus means that he is leading you, right? Which we have to understand this because we live in the world of social media, whereas I follow you and you follow me. That's not how it works with Jesus. He says, yeah, you follow me and I will be your Lord and I will lead you. Which is to say this, don't be a Christian. Don't be a Christian. Instead, be led by Jesus. Be led by Jesus as he is your Lord. See, here's the problem when we think about Jesus and his death on the cross and the resurrection as something that simply only saves us. As we said last week, that saves us from guilt in our past and saves us for heaven one day, someday, but in the present has no real impact on our lives. Salvation is not the sum total of what Jesus has done, and it's not his primary invitation is to be saved. He doesn't say, let me be your Savior. He first says, let me be your Lord. Follow me as Lord and as Savior, but let me lead you. See, salvation is simply too small of a thing to actually ultimately affect our life here and now. We need to let Jesus into the driver's seat. We need to let Jesus to sit on the throne of our lives and lead us and him as Lord. And the Apostle Paul says in very dramatic terms what this looks like in his life. He's like, you know what? I'm dead now. Just like Jesus physically, literally was crucified on the cross, I figuratively was crucified with him. Therefore, I no longer live, he says, but Christ lives in me. And now he directs my desires and my decisions and my thoughts and my plans. Not like I'm like possessed by his spirit and it's like a robot and I don't think for myself. He's like, no, I live my life now in this earthly body by trusting in Jesus to lead me. He's the one that shapes and influences my thinking and my desires and my behavior and my decisions from the inside out. Not like the law that tries to work to conform me from the outside that either produce pride or shame in me. He's like, I'm dead to that. I decided I'm not going to live like that anymore. Now I live this life by trusting in Jesus. It's like he was saying, there is no I in me. There's no I in me. It's not me who lives in me anymore. It's not my spirit, my will, my desires. I'm not in the driver's seat. I'm not sitting on the throne anymore. Jesus is. I'm dead to that old way of living for myself, living by myself, directing my own decisions, my thoughts, following my desires, following my agenda. Which brings up, if I can say this, the two biggest obstacles that we have to following Jesus. It's like this really nice thing of like, oh, and don't be a Christian, be led by Jesus. Oh, it sounds nice. You can put it into a few words, pithy statement. It's really hard. And here's the two biggest obstacles. I'm going to tell you the second biggest one first, and then the biggest one. The second biggest obstacle for people following Jesus is Christians who don't. The second biggest obstacle for people to actually become followers of Jesus is Christians who aren't. Christians who don't follow Jesus. In other words, people who take the name of Christian, but who don't actually follow Jesus. People say, yeah, I'm saved. I got baptized, or I took my first communion, or I did my confession of faith, or whatever, and I'm going to heaven one day. But in their everyday life, in their behavior, in their decisions, in their handling of their emotions, and the way they deal with their sexuality, or their money, or their anger, or their relationships, or their marriage, or their dinner table with their family, or the way they work, or the way they treat their friends at school, they look nothing like Jesus. To borrow that first century phrase, they are not covered in the dust of their rabbi. They're not following him at all. People who say, yeah, I got heaven someday, one day I've been saved, but my life today is a mess. I think that's one of the biggest obstacles to people becoming followers of Jesus is Christians who aren't. Christians who in name only have that title, as we said, as a label of static identity, but whose lives in no way embody the love, the sacrifice, the wisdom of Jesus. And I think as Christians, as the Christian church, we just need to own that and repent of that at times we are the biggest obstacle to other people actually coming to know and love and follow Jesus. We need to own that, repent of that, and just say like when our lives do not look like the one we follow, it becomes an obstacle for other people to follow him as well. But maybe we could have some sympathy for ourselves, or maybe if you're not a follower of Jesus, you can have some sympathy for us who are because of the first biggest obstacle that there is to following Jesus, which applies to every one of us, no matter whether you consider yourself a person of faith, whether you use that label of Christian or not, whether this is your first time in church or first time in a long time, whether this is a way of life for you or you're just exploring. This obstacle applies to every one of us. I don't want Jesus to be the Lord of my life because I already have a Lord of my life. It's me. It's me. I think we need to be honest about the fact that every one of us fights the inclination, fights the invitation. When Jesus says, follow me, he says, yeah. In other words, get off the throne of your life, the seat of direction, the driver's seat of your desires, your agenda, your plans, your ideas, your wisdom, your hopes and dreams, your money, your body, your life, and let me lead you. And quite frankly, nobody wants to do that. We all want to be the Lord of our own lives. In fact, we live in a culture and a continent that says, hey, nobody can tell you what to do. It's you. It's up to you. It's your body. It's your life. It's your agenda. It's your plans. It's your money. It's your future. You make the decisions. Don't let anyone tell you what to do. That is so baked into us as North Americans. In fact, it's part of the DNA that planted our country and our continent to begin with. The West is individual opportunity, individual lives and freedoms. We've enshrined it in the Declaration of Independence of the United States and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in Canada. It is so baked into who we are that none of us like the invitation to let Jesus lead us instead. I already have a Lord of my life. I don't want to trust you, or I have a hard time trusting you, letting you lead, letting you direct my desires, letting you direct my choices, letting you be the one that says, this is what's best for you, follow me, letting you be the one that leads me to sacrifice my desires and my priorities for other people to serve others, letting you be the one that tells me what I should do with my money. I have a hard time with it. We all do. That is the biggest obstacle every single person has to the invitation that Jesus gives to follow him. Not just as teacher, not just as someone who has some nice wisdom, not just as savior, someone who forgives your sins and going to take you to heaven one day, but as the Lord of your life now, as the Lord of your future, as the Lord of your desires, as the Lord of everything. It's hard to do. So why would you ever do it? Well, the Apostle Paul actually answers this, right? He says, I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. And look at what he says, now I live my life trusting in the Son of God. Why? Because he loves me and he gave up his life for me. I can trust him to be the Lord of my life, right? Because he loves me and he gave up his life for me. Can I just say it this way? You are far too important to be the Lord of your own life. Right? You are far too valuable and precious to God for you to be the Lord of your own life, right? Jesus doesn't need you to make him the Lord of your life for his sake. He's the Lord no matter what. He's the Lord if nobody else worships him. He was the Lord before the beginning of time, the scriptures tell us. He literally breathed this word into existence. He does not need you and me to worship him or follow him to make him Lord. But I need that, and you need that. Right? You and I are far too important. Paul says, look, he loved me and he gave himself up for me, right? His death dignifies, values me, that he would die for me, that he would give up his life for me, that he shows me how much he loves me. Therefore, I can trust him to be the Lord of my life. Because everything else that I make the Lord of my life, myself included, doesn't have enough wisdom, doesn't love me enough, and would probably use me up instead of build me up. And so we can trust him. What I wanted to do as we close this time together is, make it really practical. What does it look like in our lives to make Jesus the Lord of our lives, the Lord of my life? And there's a prayer that we've actually prayed a couple times. If you go through our renewal prayer ministry, which as we said, we have a day coming up in October that you can book to have some time for people to just pray with you and pray for you. But it's a prayer, and we've done it during our week of prayer that we do in January, called the Lordship Prayer. And one of the reasons I love this prayer is it really starts to get granular on, well, what does it look like? The various areas of my life where where Jesus is inviting me to trust him, to let him lead me, to let him be the Lord of my life. Instead of what we often do in our prayers is, Jesus, can you follow me? Like, this is what I want to do. Can you back me? Right? Like, let's be honest. That's what a lot of our prayers are. Jesus, I'm headed this direction. Can I get your power? Can I get your blessing? Can you move some mountains for me? Can you, part the Red Sea for me? This is what I want to do. We're trying to get Jesus to follow us and use his power so we can lead, right? We just do that. That's instinct in prayer. But a prayer like the Lordship Prayer says, no, Jesus, you're Lord. And so here's what we're going to do. We're going to read it through twice. The first time, I'm just going to read it so you can listen, because if you've never heard this prayer, I'm going to invite some of you to pray it later on, not out loud, but just if Jesus is your Lord. But before you do, I want you to just hear what it says, the words. And I want you to just listen as I slowly read it, as if you're kind of reading and you're just maybe like I'm just praying it right now, and you're just listening, because I definitely need to pray it as well. And so listen as I read this slowly. Jesus, I freely admit that I cannot and do not want to be the Lord of my life. Thank you for dying on the cross to forgive my sin and to show me how much you love me. I invite you now to be the Lord of my life, to have leadership and influence over every area of my life, directing my thinking, my desires, and my decisions. And so, be Lord of my spirit and my relationship with you. Be Lord of my conscience, my worship, and my spiritual understanding. Be Lord of my mind, my thoughts, my attitudes, my beliefs, and my imagination. Be Lord of my will, my desires, my intentions, and my decisions. Be Lord of my emotions, the expression of my feelings, and all my reactions. Be Lord of my body, my physical health and strength, my senses and appearance, my actions, exercise, rest, and diet. Be Lord of my eyes and all that I look at, my ears and all that I listen to, my mouth and what I speak, my hands and everything they touch and do, my feet and everywhere I go. Be Lord of my sexuality and its expression. Be Lord of my marriage or singleness. Be Lord of all my relationships with my family, my friends, my church, my coworkers, bosses, and employers. Be Lord of my time, my work, my serving, my leisure, my rest, my sleep, and my dreams. Be Lord of my finances, my home, my possession, and my needs. Be Lord of my plans, my ambitions, and my future. I'm going to read that again slowly, and here's what I want to do. If you are someone who has said, yes, Jesus is my Lord, I have said yes to following him. This is what I want for my life. Maybe this is the first day of the rest of that journey. You're saying it today, or you've said it many times, and you're saying, yes, I'm a follower of Jesus. As I read it, I would invite you under your breath to pray it as well. And listen as you're praying for maybe two things. Which areas am I actually the Lord of right now instead of him? You know, functionally, like I'm in control. I'm trying to drive that. I'm trying to make something happen. And which things do I need to turn over again to him to let him be the Lord of? So as you're kind of praying that, just pay attention to, sometimes it's a word or phrase that emotionally connects with you as you're praying it or as you hear me reading it. If you're not a follower of Jesus and you're not ready to pray this, that's totally fine. But I'd invite you to listen again and maybe listen with your heart and let your heart answer this question. Which areas do I realize that maybe I need some new leadership? Like I've been following maybe other people or following too many people on Instagram or whatever who are influencing me, or I'm just following my own desires or maybe what other people have told me I need to be. And I realize, I may not be ready to ask Jesus to be Lord, but I realize I need some new leadership in this area. And so if you are following him, pray it under your breath. Lord, what do you need to be Lord of again? What do I need to turn back to him? And if you're not ready to say that yet, just listen and say, well, which areas maybe do I need some new leadership in? So here we go. Jesus, I freely admit that I cannot and do not want to be the Lord of my life. Thank you for dying on the cross to forgive my sin and to show me how much you love me. I invite you now to be the Lord of my life, to have leadership and influence over every area of my life, directing my thinking, my desires, and my decisions. So, be Lord of my spirit and my relationship with you. Be Lord of my conscience, my worship, and my spiritual understanding. Be Lord of my mind, my thoughts, my attitudes, my beliefs, and my imagination. Be Lord of my emotions, the expression of my feelings, and all my reactions. Be Lord of my body, my physical health and strength, my senses and appearance, my actions, exercise, rest, and diet. Be Lord of my eyes and all that I look at, my ears and all that I listen to, my mouth and what I speak, my hands and everything they touch and do, my feet and everywhere I go. Be Lord of my sexuality and its expression. Be Lord of my marriage or singleness. Be Lord of all my relationships with my family, my friends, my church family, my coworkers, bosses, and employers. Be Lord of my time, my work, my serving, my leisure, my rest, my sleep, and my dreams. Be Lord of my finances, my home, my possessions, and my needs. Be Lord of my plans, my ambitions, and my future. As you read through that, and if you are a follower of Jesus and something came to mind that the Holy Spirit said, yeah, that area, you need to turn that back over to me. You've kind of been the Lord of your life in that area for too long. Trust me with it. Or perhaps as you've realized, if you're not a follower of Jesus, but you realize, yeah, I could benefit from some new leadership in this area or that. Can I just encourage you, wherever you're at in your faith journey today, to take a step to place more of your trust in him. To take a step to place more of your trust in him. The chair that you're sitting in today, you trusted in. Not because you believed it existed, but because you were willing to put your weight on it and assume that it'll hold you, right? Faith isn't belief. It's trust. That is an action that we demonstrate we believe that Jesus can hold us up, that he is trustworthy. And because he has died for you and loved you, you can trust him. So take a step to do that in whatever areas come to you. And if you're someone who's not a follower of Jesus and you're still exploring and you're trying to figure out, okay, is he trustworthy? Did he actually die and rise again? Like, that's a big claim. Does he actually love me? I would love to invite you to take a step of going to the Alpha course. It's a great place to actually learn about who Jesus really is. Why did he die? Did he really die? Did he really, was he really raised from the dead? And how can I trust him as my leader and my Lord? And so if that's you and you're wondering about that, or you have people in your life who you think would benefit from that, invite them to Alpha. We're running it in all 3 of our locations in King and Vaughan and Bolton, starting in the 2nd week of October. So that's there for you. But as we close, I just want to remind you of something that I said earlier that really comes from this passage, is this, that you and I are far too important to be the Lord of our own lives. Right? We matter too much to God to be the Lord of our own lives. And my prayer and hope is that you would remember or be reminded of today, or know for the first time, of how much he loves you. And how much he values you. That he would have given up his life for you. That it creates an incredible amount of love in our lives. And an incredible amount of self-worth that he would give his life up for us, that would invite us to be able to trust him as Lord.